My name is Ebony Love, and today's date is February 21st, 2020. I am sitting in Claremont, Florida, in Mr. George Starke's home, and today I'll be interviewing Mr. George Starke. If you could please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. My name is George Starke.
Okay, so this is going to be a conversation.
Okay.
If there's anything that you want to add, please let me know, or if I'm going too fast, please let me know.
Okay.
So can you please start by explaining where you were born?
I was born in Orlando.
Okay. You were born in Orlando. What are your parents' names?
My mother's name is Maddie. My father's name is same as mine, George.
Okay. And when you were growing up in Orlando, was it close to here? How far away from were you in the city, or where exactly were you?
Yes, we lived in the city.
Do you remember your address?
Yes.
What was it?
226 North Terry Street.
And how was it growing up in Orlando?
It was fine. I just grew up there through the 8th grade. I went away to school in the 9th grade.
Okay. So in the 9th grade, where did you go to school?
The Palmer Memorial Institute in Sedalia, North Carolina.
Okay. How was it moving from Florida to North Carolina?
Well, it was a boarding school.
Okay.
So it no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it drew students mostly from the South, but from all over the United States.
Okay.
Black students.
Okay. So it was a segregated school?
Yes.
And how was it? What kind of classes did you take while you were in school?
Typical high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Were there any teachers that stuck out to you while you were there?
One or two. My English teacher in particular.
Was English your favorite subject?
Well, she was a good teacher and she made it interesting. Mm-hmm. But I can't think of offhand at the moment what was my favorite subject. I just don't recall.
Is there anything from your childhood, like any memories that really stick out, whether it was from Orlando or from boarding school? Was there anything that really stuck out and kind of shaped your childhood?
I think probably going away to high school probably more than anything else.
Was it a positive experience?
Yes.
Did you meet a lot of friends? Was it an all-boys school or was it mixed?
It was mixed.
Okay. And then, so after you graduated high school, did you go straight into college, or did you know that you wanted to go to college?
The answer is yes and yes.
Okay. When you were growing up, did your parents instill in you that you had to go to college, or was it something that you knew you wanted to do on your own?
Well, I was inspired from memory.
Okay. And so how did you decide that you wanted to go to Morehouse?
Well, I expected to live in Florida, and Morehouse was the best black school, I thought. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it may well have been. And consequently, that's one of the reasons that I chose Morehouse, which had a reputation for producing more professional people than any other school at the time, such as doctors, lawyers, preachers, college presidents, and the like. So it had a good reputation.
Did you meet anybody who really changed your life while you were at Morehouse?
Not really.
Okay. How was it? Can you explain the Morehouse experience for us?
I thought it was kind of rigorous, and I thought it was beneficial in many ways. Mm-hmm. And you meet a lot of people who go on to accomplish things in life.
Mm-hmm. Did any teachers stick out to you while you were at Morehouse?
First of all, it's been a long time.
I understand.
I'd have to think about who. I think my English teacher again was good. A chemistry teacher was good, and I used to teach class when he wasn't going to be there. No, that was biology. At the time, I was pre-med.
Okay.
But I later changed to business administration.
What made you change from being pre-med?
Well, for one thing, I had a little trouble with organic chemistry.
I understand. I was in the same position. I was pre-med. I got to organic chemistry, and it was not fun.
It is not at all. And you wonder, what's going on here? What are these people talking about? But that made me start thinking about it. Then I went to North Carolina College for a couple of years. Then that's when I switched to business administration, and went to the Air Force for 3.5 years. Came back to Morehouse and graduated. Did some work at Atlanta University while I was waiting to get into law school, which I had decided to do while I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
And I remember clearly walking across a huge empty field, and I said, I finally decided what I want to do.
So you said that you went to North Carolina. So was it Morehouse, then North Carolina, and then Air Force, and then Morehouse?
And then Morehouse.
Okay. So what made you switch from Morehouse to North Carolina?
Well, it was kind of opportune, I thought, because I was changing majors, and I was able to switch from a semester school to a quarter school, and I thought that might accelerate matters. But I still needed German when I got out of the service, and I went back and finished.
And when you were in the Air Force, what was your, first of all, thank you for serving. Thank you for your service. But after being in the Air Force, what happened? Did you go anywhere special while you were in the Air Force? Did you serve in any particular war?
Yeah, when I went there, it was the Korean War was winding down, and I got shipped to Japan, which was interesting for 2 years.
How was it interesting?
Well, it was different to begin with, but it was interesting because of the work that I did and things of that nature.
What kind of work did you do in the Air Force?
I was an adjutant to a base commander in supply of aviation parts and equipment for airplanes.
And did you enjoy you said 3.5 years?
2.5.
2.5?
3.5 overall, yes. 2 years in Japan.
Okay. So did the 2 years, did you start in Japan, or did you end in Japan? Like, where was the Japan in your service?
Actually, it was in the middle.
Okay.
Because I was in Wyoming, upstate New York, Wyoming, Japan, and Oklahoma.
Were there a lot of black people or African Americans serving with you?
There were a fairly good mix, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. It was predominantly white, though.
Did anything stick out to you while you were serving in the Air Force?
Yes, and that was to get out and go to school.
So you were walking in the field.
Yeah.
Was that in Japan, or was that
That was in Oklahoma.
And so you're walking in the field, and how is it that you decided that law school was it? Did it just come to you?
Well, I'd naturally been thinking about all sorts of alternatives. And then I realized that would be ideal of them all. And I hadn't decided where I wanted to go to school, except I knew that it would probably be a couple of places that I later applied for. One was Northwestern, and another one was the law school in St. Louis, where the dean used to be on the faculty.
I think it's George Washington.
It is.
Yeah.
Washington University.
Yeah.
So I was admitted to both of those. And one day I was in Atlanta doing some work at AU, Atlanta University. And I read in the paper that Florida had changed its restrictions. And I applied, and to my surprise, I was admitted.
So when you read it in the paper, was it the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, or was it a black newspaper?
Journal-Constitution.
And so when you found out about Florida, was it because you grew up in Orlando, or why did you always want to come back to Florida?
Well, Florida was in my blood.
Okay. Is it both of your parents are from Florida?
Yeah, my mother's originally from Gainesville, and my father's from a place called Hawthorne, Melrose, outside of Gainesville.
So going to the University of Florida would have been close to home?
Well, that wouldn't have been influential, but coincidental.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you think that if you would have gotten into a different school in Florida, would you have gone?
Well, I have thought that had I been number 3 or 4, I probably would have been able to graduate from University of Florida, which was always my preference. When it appeared that this was going to become impossible, I did go after that to University of Chicago and Notre Dame, see whether I could get in immediately. But some of my friends from the University of Florida who had their own problems went to Stetson and other places and graduated and, kept going forward. But I wanted to go to a particular class of school. But on reflection, there was I was under an extreme amount of pressure because it was a gross embarrassment not to finish. And it took me about 20 years before I could even mention the University of Florida or the law school. Unless somebody asked me something, I could answer it, but I could never bring it up. It just wasn't in me, like being in the wilderness, really. That's how great the how oppressive that experience was. So had I been admitted, I probably would not have been a good candidate because you focus it's intent, and you need to be able to focus. And at that point, I probably wouldn't have been a good student. But anyway, the answer to your question is yes, I probably should have looked at a couple other schools in Florida, but I didn't because of the sense of embarrassment that I And on that same reflection, I probably should have anyway.
So you were talking about having friends that went to other colleges in Florida. Were those friends people that had attended UF Law with you, or were they friends from other places?
Yeah, my classmates, some of my classmates.
Classmates from?
University of Florida.
Okay. So
what happened is that there were 360 people in my class, 60 of whom graduated.
Wow, I did not know that. That's not a lot.
It's really not. They've changed the process a bit now, but those were our numbers.
So
some of them went to some of the other places.
How does that make you feel, knowing that 300 students, there were 360 and only 60 graduate? How does that make you feel now in reflecting on it?
Well, I don't feel badly about it now anymore. I was able somehow to get it out of my system. But I did feel badly because I should have been one of those 60.
But you have your degree now. In 2019, you were offered the honorary degree. How was that experience?
It's kind of mixed. I mean, it's something you're glad to have. It's an honor beyond any lifetime expectancy. It's empty because you don't know any more today than you knew yesterday. You don't know any more the day after you get it than you did the day before. But it's great to have, and it's inspirational, motivational, and well worth having. I'd rather have a law degree.
I don't know about that. Yeah, it's bittersweet because we hear your story, and I guess one of the questions that I have is, what was it like while you were at UF? We know what the papers write about your experience, but can you explain in your own words how it was when you were there?
Well, it turns out that, well, first of all, I went there on September the 15th in 1958, a little before you had been thought of.
Just a little bit.
And beautiful sunshiny day, and one of my cousins dropped me off. And as I was approaching the law school, which at the time was at 13th and U, and I saw all these reporters gathered out in front of the building, and as I was walking up the sidewalk, I saw a door open on the side, and I went in there to avoid going through the front. And I sat down, and I remember, very well, it's something that just stays in your mind. It's a picture that just doesn't go away. It was so unique. I remember well being there, sitting there, and there were mostly men. In my class, there was one female.
Okay.
She didn't make it. She had more stress than I did. But because not only was she catching it from normal quarters, the people in the class didn't really treat her as nice as they could have. And she took things personally a little bit that I never took personally. So anyway, she was there for a year. But anyway, I had almost a whole row by myself when I sat down. And there were people in front and in the back and a little further over. But then Fred Levin was sitting behind me. And the guy who was publisher of the Alligator, was in our class. He went on to become general counsel for the Library of Congress.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they talked to me. I don't remember whether Fred first or the other fellow whose name I can't recall at the moment. But Fred and I did get to be friends almost on day one because he's that kind of a person. He is a person of conviction, and if he believes something is right, he's going to act on it, and he's going to work through whatever the problems may be, as he had to do in his own case at school. But we went on to become good friends, and we studied in the same study groups. We had basically the same classes. Our studies continued in the evenings after the library closes, which I understand now it's never closes.
Never closes.
and that's far more appropriate, isn't it, than to close at 11 or 12. You're just getting started. And anyway, he and I had a lot of mutual experiences, which is how we got to be good friends. Among them is we couldn't find a mentor. Everybody else had one.
Wow.
The dean didn't like him. I don't know what he thought about me, but somebody died in his family, and he told the dean he needed a week off to go back to Pensacola to deal with it. The dean told him, "Why are you there? Why don't you just stay?"
Wow.
Suppose he had.
Yeah.
But fortunately, that was something he was able to turn around because his grades went up to the top after the dean told him that. And in a way, that was Dean Finn, a name that no one ever forgets who ever knew him. But as far as the faculty was concerned, I can't think of any of them who didn't speak when I would pass them in the hall. I didn't have any relations with any of them, though. I was impressed with each one of them. Mr. Clark, for example, in criminal law was the state's foremost authority in criminal law. And I probably could think of some other names, but Josh Oken was our mentor when we finally found one. He was from Yale, and he was immediately ostracized for befriending us and trying to help us. He died early, so he's no longer around. But we were in study groups. Eventually, we were able to expand our groups after people realized that, we were okay. And in those days, people used to stomp on the floor. Have you heard about that?
I have, but is there a term that... So, can you explain it?
Well, in the classroom, somebody would say something that was really on point, and your classmates might appreciate having heard it, or it may be funny, or it may be wrong, but one way or another, they would just stomp. And I remember when I said something about the weight of authority in answer to some question, and it's, well, the weight of authority seems to be, and the phrase seemed funny at the time, and all of a sudden people started stomping. And that's when I knew that I was accepted by my classmates.
Wow.
because they treated me like anybody else, and that was an objective that I had wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, that happened, but I don't really know. Fred knows better than I do. What the stories were, whatever Starke later, whatever he experienced, whatever he saw subsequently, as to how I was treated, he would know. But I know how I was treated up to that point, and I never had any real complaints. But I do know that at that Thanksgiving, I got a call from Mr. Hawkins, who called to find out how things were going, and he was very nice. And he called basically to wish me well. And I never met him, but we did speak that once. That same Thanksgiving, I got a call either from the governor's office or from Dr. Wright's office, one or the other. And they told me, don't go back to Orlando through the forest. Instead, I should go back through Jacksonville and then go back. And the reason was because the Florida Highway Patrol had integrated the Klan. And occasionally my name had come up, and they were expecting me to drive through the forest that first year. And that's the only real threat that I had. But I got mail occasionally from people I didn't know. The ones with bad handwriting, they would open.
Wow.
Yeah, because, who's going to write you a goofy letter? So those they would open. And if there wasn't any, I never saw them, if there was anything bad in them. But I didn't have any bad experiences the whole time. I didn't live on the campus. I lived with relatives, of which there were quite a few at that time. And there were a couple of men in our class who, in those days, you had to go through the line to pick up your assignments and all your various acceptances. It was all done by computer. We were there before computers.
Maybe just a little bit before computers.
Yeah, it's weird. But the Florida Highway Patrol, there were two people in our class who looked older than everybody else, and they were. And it turns out that they had the same classes with Fred and myself. They picked up their material. One of them was in front of me, one of them was behind me, but you don't notice it, because everybody was going to be either in front of you or behind you. But later, that same Thanksgiving, we noticed that they didn't go to class much, but they were out in the hall and out smoking during classroom, and it changed when we changed. Turns out that they were assigned to protect me.
Oh.
And I didn't know that was going on until Thanksgiving. They came over to introduce themselves. They told me they were satisfied that things were going well, and they thought I was safe, and they told me they were. But one of my cousins was a deputy sheriff at the time, and he had a station at night diagonally across the street from where I lived. So on the same street as Chestnut Funeral Home.
I know what that is.
So there was an automobile dealership diagonal across the street. And his car would be hidden over among the cars. But he was at an angle where he could see my house. And so he later told me why he was there, because I'd figured it out by then anyway, because I kept seeing the car. And if he wasn't in it, somebody else was in it. And they were, I guess, being certain that nobody was following me or something like that. So those are some of the
highlights
that I can think of.
Mm-hmm. So I have a little bit of questions after your story.
Yeah. Would you care for?
Yeah, I was about to grab something, but I didn't want to eat if you weren't.
Oh, don't wait for me.
Okay.
Help yourself and whatever.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking, you said that there was a woman who was attending.
Mm-hmm.
You said that she lasted a year. Where were you? Did you ever talk to her, or did you never interact with her? How was that?
Yes. We were good friends. I guess misery loves company.
I guess. I don't know. So
I did talk with her. Yeah, she was a good person.
But she was not part of that 60 number. Graduated?
No, she was only there 2 semesters.
Okay. And then you were talking about mentors and how you finally found one. When did you, how far into your time there did you find him?
Probably the 2nd semester.
Mm-hmm. And it was, you said us, he was both your and Fred's mentor?
Yeah, both of us. We were in the same class, and we had the same mentor. He was the only one who was willing to take us on and be helpful.
And what roles do mentors have for law students when you were attending law school?
I'm sorry, repeat.
What role did mentors have when you were attending law school?
Well, basically, I think the ones we had was a little late because they would help you with your studies. And your questions of whatever kind about school, about classes, about your personal life, career choices, how to study. And they were just, Josh was just, a good person in that regard. So, and that's my only experience with having a mentor.
And was he, you said that he graduated from Yale?
Yale Law.
And so was he a white mentor, or what was his background?
He's Jewish.
Okay.
And may have been one of the few at the time.
These cookies are delicious, by the way.
I'm glad you like them.
When you were talking about the highway patrol agents that were in the house, do you know who assigned them, or why, who hired them to protect you?
Well, they were out of Tallahassee.
Okay. So it wasn't the school, it was the...
No.
Okay.
But I'll tell you something about the school as I remember. I told you that the first 20 years were like being in the wilderness. I mean, it was really awful, an awesome experience, negatively. And it just grew to become that way. Because you tell yourself you're going to get through this no matter what. And so it's disappointment, to say the least. But it just so happens that about 20 years later, I had a call from 2 recent graduates of the law school, 2 black guys. And Dr. Wrights had encouraged them to try to track me down, locate me, which they did. And he asked me to come to see him, which I did. And he wanted to know would I be interested in maintaining a relationship with the University of Florida and with the law school, which I did. And so he said, okay, first thing I think you'd want to do is be on the board of the Alumni Association, which I did, and enjoyed it, and, began to meet a lot of people and know some of the problems the students were having and some of the issues. And I probably was on that board for 4 or 5 years. And would come down frequently to meetings and things like that, football games. And was selected into Blue Key. And following that, I was we lived in D.C. at the time, and following that, I did some fundraising for for the major university fund.
They just did the fundraiser yesterday, and I cannot name it, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, D.C. For the D.C. chapter of the foundation. That's the one.
Were you affiliated with the Association of Black Alumni at all?
I was on the board, and I was one of those who voted in favor of its being created.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me, because I wouldn't have thought to mention it. And because I was just about done with that part of some of the things that I'd been involved in. So no, I wasn't a member because it didn't exist. But it came to exist, and my vote counted in that direction.
So that was established while you were on the board in the 70s?
I don't remember what year it was.
Okay.
But I remember some of the comments that some of the people were making. But we just got integration. So now people want segregation again. But somebody came up with a way that wasn't an issue. And it's to make it a part of the National Association.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yesterday, they had a fundraiser, so it was university-wide.
Yeah.
But the Association of Black Alumni had an event specifically at the Institute of Black Culture yesterday. So there was music, dancing, food, all of that.
Yeah,
last night.
I'm sure.
Yeah. If I put my phone, I'll show you some pictures from it.
I got some, that'll be great. I think I got an email about that yesterday.
I got about 3. Yeah. But it was the Gator Giving Day, and everybody was pushing for fundraising. One thing, I just lost my question. You were talking about kind of the gap of the two people reaching out to you. Before that, though, what influenced you to stop attending UF? And when did that happen?
Well, I was there 3 semesters.
Okay.
I had 2 misfortunes while I was there. One was we'd been up all night studying, and I was 5 minutes late to an exam to which I was not admitted. Another one, I remember in criminal law, I knew everything there was to know about criminal law because I had studied. I had good notes and everything. And when I sat down to write, the only thing that cropped up on my paper was my name, nothing else. So when I turned in the paper, it just had my name on it. And in those days, I don't know if they still do it or not, but you would have a code so that the instructors and teachers wouldn't know whose paper they're grading. Do they still do that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, they started that out the year we were there.
Wow.
Primarily to keep me from getting discriminated against.
Wow.
And so and that was totally pressure. And in the end, it made a difference because 2 zeros are not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And today, what I think would happen, I don't know what they would do about the being 5 minutes late, but that could be overcome. But today, I think that if somebody were to write a paper or take an exam, and folks know how important it is,
Mm-hmm.
if the only thing on your exam was your name or your number, somebody might say, well, let's find out what this is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there would be a solution, and that would be to just go and take it separately. Maybe not, I don't know. But one thing I do know is the moment I closed the door and walked out of the class, all the answers started coming.
Wow.
So,
I understand that feeling.
yeah, but that's something, to be avoided. And I don't know how you wouldn't expect something like that to happen because you know that you're going to ace this exam. And then all of a sudden, blank paper, blank mind.
So after that experience and after ending your time at UF, what did you do next?
I went to 2 law schools I mentioned to see if I could get back in. And I went to Chicago to look for some work. After I'd been at the University of Chicago, I stayed for a few weeks and realized that I liked the East Coast better. Mm-hmm. And came back to New York, and I worked on Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of firms, Moody's Investor Service, Oppenheimer,
mm-hmm.
a couple others. And moved to D.C., worked for New York Stock Exchange firm, Legg Mason, set up an insurance department for them. And after that, I was Associate Director of Government Affairs for the Greyhound Corporation.
Wow.
Represented about 22 companies to the government.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I opened my own business and sold coal and oil and petroleum products to the government under some of the minority programs. And eventually worked for PEPCO, the electric utility in D.C., where I was project manager for something called privatization
mm-hmm.
of utilities on large military installations, and had my own business. And at one time owned a small investment banking firm, which I sold in 1986. Basically, that's it.
Well, you lived in D.C. at a kind of interesting time in our nation's history. Did anything stick out to you while you were living in D.C.? Like, were there any events that you were a part of or could witness?
I remember being there when Dr. King was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
We were married then, and we lived in one of the outskirts, but we didn't go into we didn't participate in any of the activities, but
mm-hmm.
we knew a lot about them because it was in all the news and all the detail about the fires and things that followed.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't there in the 60s when the Alabama things were going on.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one other thing that I remember is that everything related to the University of Florida was just trouble-free. I thought it reflected the personality of the president, who was Dr. Rates, and of the Governor Collins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of those people have mixed reputations because of what they did before desegregation.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did after, in many cases, is totally different. And I was going to make a point about, during that period, it was right after some of the civil rights acts and laws had passed related to desegregated schools,
Mm-hmm.
and all the states were picking the level at which they wanted to, or were forced to desegregate. And black students began to crop up at many of the schools in southern states. Some were trouble-free.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one in Georgia, I remember, was a lady who didn't seem to have had any problems at all. And but James Meredith in Mississippi, have you heard his name?
Mm-hmm.
Well, his experience were much more gross than that of anybody else. But I don't know whether he ever took the bar or ever passed the bar. I know he used to work for Strom Thurmond,
Mm-hmm.
of all people.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, and I haven't heard his name lately, but he was shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the intent in Florida was not to let anything like that happen. I didn't eat on the campus.
Mm-hmm.
I never went to a football game, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just to class, to the library, and over to Fred's house, or wherever we would study after hours, including Chestnut Funeral Home,
Mm-hmm.
where it was always quiet.
Yeah. So you mentioned Governor Collins and how he did take measures, even if you didn't know all of them at the time, to kind of protect you. Did you ever have any conversations with him personally?
I met him once.
Okay.
Later, he was head of a civil rights commission for one of the federal agencies. May have been under the Department of Labor at the time, I'm not sure. But somehow my name had been submitted to participation in that effort to engage minorities in commerce. And Bobby Kennedy was head of that committee. And Governor Collins was the president and whatnot, but I met him once, and that was in the course of that meeting, and we had a chance to talk.
And how was that experience? Do you remember?
Very interesting. It wasn't a long conversation, but very interesting. Something you might be interested in knowing about him. Barbara.
Yeah.
Can we have some more hot tea?
Sure.
Oh, I am okay, I promise.
Okay.
I'm okay with the tea. Yeah, I was just about to get more snacks.
Okay, let me make sure it's hot here.
I was going to tell you about his career, how he got started out of law school.
Mm-hmm.
The rules were different, but I don't think he had to go to school for 2 years.
I think, yeah, through my research, I've been seeing that a lot of people entered and graduated within 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unlike now where it's 3. So.
I'll tell you somebody, I think John Morgan may have done that.
That's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, though.
Yeah.
I don't know when they made the change.
But Governor Collins, his first case was to represent a farmer whose cow had been hit by a train.
In Florida?
No, in Tennessee, I think, where he was from.
Mm-hmm.
And he won the case, and he impressed the railroad so much, they hired him.
Wow. That's when you know that you've done well, because the other side wants to hire you. That's funny. And I guess the reason why I'm interested in Governor Collins is because I have read about his reputation, especially before desegregation, and then during Virgil Hawkins' trials, and what, I don't know if it was necessarily Governor Collins who did the policies or if it was just his name being signed off on them, but like that process before you arrived at UF.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to hear your take on him.
And I was on a panel over at the law school one time, and one of the panelists is a historian, and he was concerned about Dr. Wright's reputation. And he told me that after he heard what I had to say about him, and I didn't know not to say it, he told me that puts him in a slightly different light than he had viewed him before. I expected he was a segregationist. He was fighting to keep his job and things that go along with it. And when the law changed, he was able to be more himself.
And when you say that, you're talking about Governor Collins or
Dr. Rice.
Okay.
As far as Governor Collins, I only knew him in one respect, and that would be post 1958. Because prior to that, I was away for all those years and didn't keep up with political things as I did at one time, and then I realized how dirty politics can be. Lost interest in it except to vote.
To this day.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had a phone call with Mr. Hawkins one time. Did you ever meet W. George Allen or Judge Mikkel?
Yeah, I know him.
And how was your relationship with George Allen?
We were cordial. We weren't anywhere at the same time. But we would meet from time to time over at the law school.
Okay. That's cool to me. Sorry. I'm just nerding out.
Yeah.
And then did you ever meet Judge Mikkel?
Yeah, same to him. Yeah.
And so I don't...
Is he still sick, or is he...
Judge Mikkel, or Judge Mikkel is... I just saw him this morning. He is in physical therapy. He is in a wheelchair most of the time, but he can stand and walk short distances. But he's okay.
He had a stroke?
Yes. And then W. George Allen I think he had a heart attack in November. But yeah.
Well, I had talked with him when he was planning to retire. And I was wondering, after learning he'd passed, that whether or not there was a reason why he retired when he did, because I think he was a few months short of...
I can pour right from here. This is good.
Thank you.
It's a little stronger than the other one. Is that too strong for you?
No, ma'am.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
You're welcome.
She likes what's here.
Yes.
I'm glad. I'm very glad. There you go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I was wondering if maybe he had a reason, because he only had 6 more months ago before his 50th anniversary. I think he stopped short of it.
I don't know exactly his story yet, but I do know he's still around. He actually just swore in one of our professors was elected to the bench, and he just swore her in, and I think that was not a year ago exactly, but around a year ago. But he's still around. Today is the 50th anniversary of the African American Studies program at UF, and they just revealed a historical marker, and that's where I saw him earlier today.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're all turning 50 right now.
Well, that time goes by a little too fast.
Yeah.
And later you'll find out that the older you get, the faster it goes. Is that one of your concerns today?
Not right now. I just need everything to slow.
Too slow?
Yeah, to slow down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything that you would like for young Black law students to know?
Yeah. Basically, do every day's work every day.
So when you say that, do you mean just in regards to law school, or do you mean to serve a higher purpose? What do you mean by that?
Well, my context was while you were a student. But, master your material so that when you do become a lawyer, it'll be instinctive for you to do the same.
When you left law school and then you started working in New York on Wall Street, did you feel like your career was fulfilling, or did you always feel like law was supposed to be your career?
Some places it was more fulfilling than others. Like I think I enjoyed working for myself more than any of the others, except possibly the electric utility. That was very interesting and complicated and challenging.
And that was in D.C., or was that back in Florida?
That was in D.C. I had looked around for employment in Florida, but at that time it was unavailable. I know you were born in Atlanta, right? There was a person who was treasurer of Atlanta Life. I don't remember their name now, but during the same time, his daughter had some advanced degrees in business. And Merrill Lynch or somebody like that wouldn't hire her, notwithstanding. He called him one day and told him, "Look, we're moving our account unless you hire her." And she went to work the next week. But things like that were during a period when people were first at all kinds of things. Like I was first at Moody's Investor Service. And that's probably the only place, but there were few blacks at some of the other places. But of all those, I liked the utility better. You might think about getting it when you get your degree, looking into working utility law.
Wow.
Big salaries.
I don't know what I want to do yet, so I might look into it.
Think about it.
Yeah. There was one thing I forgot to ask when we were talking about Morehouse. So I know a little bit about you. I saw that you were a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. Did you cross at Morehouse or did you cross somewhere else?
Morehouse.
And how was that experience?
It was fun.
And did you stay active afterwards?
Yes, for years. but then kind of drifted away from it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun, except for paddling. I don't think they permit that these days.
Mm-hmm.
But they did, and it came along.
Mm-hmm. And so being at Morehouse, well, back then it was just a normal college, but today it's like an HBCU. So I was going to ask, was the experience different? But I would assume not. Is that correct? Because Kappa was founded at Indiana University?
Yeah, 1911, if I remember.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't know what the question would be. If you have any insights about Kappa or anything like that.
Actually, I haven't been active with my fraternity in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to go to the national meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and I was an officer in my chapters, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any support when you came to UF? Did they know that you were down there?
When I came?
When you went to UF, did your fraternity brothers know that you were down there? And
there weren't any on campus.
okay.
But I probably went to some of the local meetings maybe once or twice, because one of my cousins in Gainesville was a Kappa.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be about the most of my participation, but I never had time to do anything except on either Saturday or Sunday, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about it.
And the reason why I ask is because I don't know if you knew, but Kappa was the first Black Greek letter organization on UF's campus.
Well, it was.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact year that they were founded, but it was sometime in the 60s. I want to say 68, but I could be wrong. No, I could be wrong about that, but just wanted to know if you knew anything about that or anything.
No, I know you're Zayden.
Yes, I am.
I saw that on your license.
Yeah. We were the first undergraduate sorority to come on campus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have any more questions for you unless you wanted to tell me any more stories or anything like that.
Well, I think that the University of Florida and the law school, the Levin College of Law, are two of the greatest institutions in my life. I was awarded a Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2009. And that was really, I thought, a great distinction to be one of only 400 people who had that in the history of the university. And then, of course, last year, the Doctor of Laws, which is very, very exciting and stimulating, as I mentioned. But the oddity of it all is that it doesn't seem like it's been so long ago. I mean, but time has gone by so fast. It's 9 months already. And it seems like yesterday.
So one thing that I always like to end my interviews with is, do you have, whether it's a favorite scripture, a favorite saying, a favorite quote, or anything like that, that you would like to leave us with?
I haven't thought about this lately. So the answer right now is no. As soon as we're done, I'll probably think of something.
That's okay. Well, I want to thank you again for taking your time to have this conversation with me, and I hope that future generations of, whether they're an aspiring lawyer or aspiring historian, can listen to this and just hear where you've come and how you have basically opened the doors for people like me to be able to come to UF Law, because had it not been for you, I wouldn't be in law school now. So I thank you again.
Well, my pleasure altogether.